this is going to drag on, I assume, for the coming hours. It takes time, and especially it takes time for both Hamas and that task force that's made up of the United States, Israel, Qatar, and Turkey to locate the remaining bodies. So this is going to drag on all day, but as we're speaking, Donald Trump has just arrived at the Knesset where I am right now. The red carpet has been rolled out for him. Security is extremely tight here.
Imagine.
Even lawmakers have certain areas that they can't access inside the building.
And we heard from one of our correspondents that we've heard a little bit from hostages talking to their loved ones before they were allowed out. Is that the extent of how much we'll see the hostages today, do you think?
I don't think that Donald Trump will be able to see the hostages, mainly because they are in a really bad condition physically. We know for a fact that they have been starved. Some of them have been tortured. They have injuries. They need to be flown directly as soon as possible to hospitals to undergo medical checks. So I don't think he's going to be able to see them. There could be some element of surprise here, but as far as I know, this is a relatively in and out kind of visit. He comes here, he gives a speech, and then he's flying more or less directly to Sharm el-Sheikh, where he will participate in the peace conference.
And just give us a sense of how much welcome he's getting here, how beloved, I suppose, Donald Trump is in Israel at the moment.
Look, if there was an election tomorrow and he was running, he would win. Donald Trump is extremely popular because he's done what many Israelis thought was impossible. Many Israelis thought, look, the remaining hostages are probably going to die in Gaza, because why would Hamas give them up? It is literally their only card they hold left. And somehow he managed to force through a deal. First of all, by putting heavy pressure on Netanyahu, saying, look, it's now or never. You're doing this. And he also put pressure on Qatar, which is essentially an extension of Hamas. So I think without him, we wouldn't be here. So he's rightfully being credited for making this deal happen. And whether you like him or not, I think there are very few observers and analysts left in the world that cannot get themselves to credit him for this. So Israelis are extremely happy, and they are celebrating him. You know, people, even ministers. I saw a minister walking around with a "Make America Great Again" cap inside the hallways of the Knesset. You know, it tells you how popular he is right now.
I'm sure that's right. Jotam, great to speak to you as ever. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Let's talk to our panel, shall we? You heard there Jotam Confino just detailing where we are and where things are likely to go. Manveen, what is your expectation for what comes after today? Because today is clearly an emotional, sort of joyous celebration of this moment in time, but there are still a lot unanswered questions.
Yeah, I mean, what comes next is the $20 billion question right now. This is the only stage that we have any assurance of. You know, we know the hostages will all be out today. I think Hamas has said they might struggle to get some of the bodies. It might take a little bit longer, but we know that they are coming. We know that the IDF have withdrawn from part of the Gaza Strip. We've seen floods of people being able to start heading home. And we know that the prisoners are also being released. Beyond that, you know, this peace process is very, very unusual. It's not really a peace process. It's a deal. And it's got sort of a sense of like a runaway train about it. It's got a huge head of steam. There's a lot of momentum entirely brought to bear by Donald Trump, as we've been hearing. But there is none of the detail that normally precedes it that gives us any assurance of a timeline or understanding where it's going. In fact, it's been such a sort of a feat of utter momentum. They've been sort of they've all agreed to sign a deal, not necessarily the same deal. And that's part of the problem. You know, Netanyahu has done speeches in Hebrew, basically saying we've received everything we needed. We don't need to move the IDF out of the Gaza Strip. They will stay there and we're getting the hostages back. This is a huge victory. And Hamas will disarm. Hamas has done speeches saying they absolutely won't be disarming anytime soon. You know, it's really hard to know.
And there's videos of them walking around shooting people on the streets of Gaza.
Well, they've put on their uniforms again. They say it's in order to get the secure the places where the hostages will be leaving from. But in the meantime, they're taking out some of the clans who have sort of risen up in certain areas and taken over their prominence. So, you know, there are still sort of clashes happening on the ground in Gaza right now. It's really hard to know how much of this will actually stick and whether there is, normally you would have a timeline.
And Edward, that's a really good question, isn't it? Because we had Hamish Faulkner, the Foreign Office Minister, on the programme earlier, and we put to him, would the UK be prepared to provide some of this potential force on the ground, or, reinforce what happens next? And the answer was not very clear. Who do we think will be able to provide that level of security?
I think saying that it's not very clear is a kind of understatement, and I'm sure that whoever comes, I don't think Britain's got the capability really to do anything serious. We were last there in the days of the Palestine Mandate, and that didn't end very well, and we had a lot more soldiers then than we do now. I think to me the biggest question right now is where this really leaves Netanyahu, because although there's been a lot of pressure put on Hamas, and they've had to give up their number one card hostages, this has also been the greatest level of pressure any administration, American administration, has ever put on an Israeli leader. And we saw really the sort of real estate negotiating tactics that Donald Trump honed in New York being applied to Netanyahu, not least in making him apologise to Qatar for that military strike in Qatar. So I'm very curious to know from your Israel correspondents whether Netanyahu's really going to be bathing in the rosy light of victory for long, or whether he's going to be faced with all sorts of difficult questions, not least who's responsible for security in Gaza now, and is the IDF really going to withdraw? And then, of course, what about the West Bank, which is also, if we weren't talking about Gaza, we'd be talking about the West Bank, which is the most enormous mess with violence on a daily basis. And I don't see anything in this 20-point deal that's going to solve the conundrum of the West Bank.
Ed's completely right. So over the weekend, you've already seen Netanyahu, who sort of feels his grip on power going as a result of this. This could sink his government. There's a really strong coalition ready to stand against him. He's come out blaming everybody from the public who've been out protesting in Israel for what's happened, rather than taking any of the blame himself. He's already talking about going in again. He sort of said, we're seeing Hamas armed again. There will be, basically sort of saying all the things that would imply, as soon as the hostages are home, don't be surprised if the war is back on again. That's stuff he's saying out loud.
And what would Trump say to that is a massive question, because Trump doesn't have a great deal of attention on this either. So he's done a great thing getting the hostages back, but if then war starts to bleed out again, will he blame Netanyahu? Will he blame Hamas? Will he go on to the next thing?
I thought the most interesting... Sorry, just very quickly, I thought the most revealing video I've seen actually came out over the weekend, and it was Trump talking to his granddaughter on a golf cart, sort of saying it was a great ambition to be president, and now the next big ambition has to be to a great president. And clearly somebody has talked to him saying, if you can get peace in the Middle East, this will be your greatest legacy. And I think he wants to make it work. So he's saying the war is over. You get the feeling he won't be very pleased, especially since he hasn't yet got the Nobel Peace Prize in the bag, if Netanyahu starts it up again. But Netanyahu is about to lose power. People are already calling for a big national commission into how October the 7th happened, which would look very bad for him. And, there's a lot of internal pressure on him to collapse this deal.